Good afternoon. Yeah, today we'll be talking about SolGold, an active explorer in Ecuador who has recently discovered a world-class gold-copper porphyry deposit known as Alpala. Now, all these diagrams I'll be showing this afternoon are in this handout, which you can get at our booth, or they're also listed on the website in a September release presentation for investors. You can read that on the website at your leisure. Okay. Well, SolGold's been active in Ecuador since 2013, and several people would arguably tell you that Ecuador has a similar style of mineralization and age as the Chilean giant porphyries in northern Chile, which supply 220 million tons of copper in resource and past production, or contributing 25% of the world's global copper. SolGold's been there since 2013, which is 4 years earlier than most other companies who have now swept in a pegging claim rush in the last year and a half. So SolGold has the most amount of tenements of any company in the country with 72. There's 11 significant projects. Most of them are porphyry copper golds, although some of them are epithermal high-grade vein systems. The important thing is Ecuador in the past 2 years has turned to be a very positive and supporting country for foreign mining investment. The Cascabel project, which is the flagship of SolGold in the country, and we'll talk about that further. It has over 5 million tons of copper and 12 million ounces of gold, and those numbers are growing. We'll discuss that. This is held 85% by SolGold, which is listed on the LSE and TSX, 15% by Cornerstone, listed on the TSX. We have 12 diamond drill rigs turning at present. We have completed over 155,000 meters of drilling to date. We're aiming to double the announced mineral resource inventory that was put out in January this year. So that's aiming for a target of 10 million tons of copper, or 22 billion pounds of copper, and 25 million ounces of gold. We'll have a revised resource statement, what we've been working on in-house, and will be then gone through SRK, and that should be out in December this year. The high-grade core, this is very important. This is the high-grade copper gold core of the deposit, which of course will enable early cash flow and make the deposit very attractive for mining. We've been drilling more holes in the area, and we're tending to add tons and grade. We're well funded with about $45 million US in the bank. And we're having growing industry and institutional support. Most recently in September, BHP bought 103 million shares, or about 6.1% of the company. Newcrest owns a significant portion of the company. We'll show you the share structure in coming slides. So our strategy going forward is really enhancing the high grade, gold zones, copper zones. We're working on a preliminary economic assessment, which is going through a scoping study to determine potential mining methods and profitability, as well as metallurgical processing schemes. We're also advancing our regional properties and targets to aim for drilling them within 6 months' time. Now on the left slide is Ecuador, and you can see that belt of orange is the late Eocene, early Oligocene belt of mineralization, which is importantly the same age as the prolific copper deposits in northern Chile. The right-hand diagram shows the size, the relative size of Ecuador, and then the size of northern Chile, which produces 25% of the world's copper. So what's the difference between the two areas? Why has so much been found in Chile and not so much in Ecuador until recently? One thing is the arid, high and dry climate of Chile. You can literally see deposits and alteration footprints from space. Right? We use aster imagery to help us guide and look for these big alteration systems. The difference is Ecuador is lower elevation, much wetter, and covered by jungle and in cloud. Where you find deposits here, it's walking the streams. That's how Alpala was discovered in 2012. Geophysics also helps you see beneath the cover. There's a lot more to be found in Ecuador. The share structure, we have about 1.7 billion shares. These are traded on the LSE main board and the TSX. At current share price, which is around 37.5 pence or 60 cents Canadian, there's a market cap of 630 million pounds. That's over $1 billion US dollars. Newcrest is invested and it controls about 15.4% of the shares of the company. They have one member on the board. They do not have a controlling interest. It's non-blocking shareholding and they have to follow management. They've had 3 different chunks of investment. Most recently, BHP bought 6.1% or 103 million shares in September at a 20% premium to the price at the time. We have an accomplished management team and technical group. Nick Mather has been in the industry for over 35 years. He's highly invested in the company. He's a big believer of SolGold. Jason Ward, more than 20 years experience, lots of remote operations in PNG and Solomon Islands, which makes working in Ecuador like a cakewalk. He's very good with the local people, and we have a very strong community support. Myself, I know a little bit about porphyry deposits. Ben Whistler is our technical service advisor. He's been involved in epithermals and porphyries in the Southeast Asia Pacific area for about 20 years. But most importantly are the Ecuadorians. We have over 400 employees. 97% or more are Ecuadorian. These people are capable. They speak English well. They're very motivated. They're a lot of fun to work with. And this is not just on the geology side. This is our human resources, social programs. It's really been excellent and a privilege to work with them. They're the true heroes. I'm the one talking here, but they're the ones that get the credit. Well, you know, Ecuador's really turned around. 3 years ago, people didn't want to know about Ecuador. Now, in the past year and a half, there's been more than 300 new exploration concessions granted. Many big companies have come in and endorsed it, such as Anglo American, BHP, and Newcrest, which also have a portion of SolGold, First Quantum, INV, Lundin Gold, Hancock, FMG. So this is really, it's really become the flavor of the month, and there's a modern-day gold and copper rush in Ecuador. Now, up in the vicinity of Apala, SolGold Cascabel project in northern Ecuador, you can see that SolGold, of course, has bought or are exploring for more properties in the immediate area, but other groups such as Hancock, Newcrest, Codelco, which is the Chilean national copper mining company, INV Metals, and Anami, which is an Ecuador government minerals group, are all active in the region and basically staked most of the open ground around Cascabel. Well, it's a good location. It's 3 to 3.5 hours drive from Quito on beautifully sealed bitumen roads. All right, Ecuador's put a lot of money into their infrastructure over the years. There's ports, 100 kilometers by road, 180 kilometers by road from Cascabel. As I've already waxed lyrical about the competency of the workforce. There's a lot of water. That means there's a lot of cheap power. Very important. There's also a major power transmission line that is within 30 kilometers from the project. And the elevation's not high. You don't have to go up to 4,000 or 5,000 meters, where the prospect is 600 to 1,800 meters above sea level, where the project is. Well, I'm just going to talk very quickly. I'm used to talking about technical things, and I'll say much less on that today. But it really is about the geology, mapping the streams. This deposit had been missed. It poked out of the ground like a finger that opens up into a very large hand. And a vertical ore column of over 1,700 meters. That's 1.7 kilometers, rivaling some of the biggest ore columns in the world that you see at Grasberg, for example, in Indonesia. And for 30 years, companies walked over this ground, governments walked over this ground, and they missed the 80-meter exposure. So mapping is important. Here I'm showing you a series of northerly directed, northwest, and northeasterly directed mineralized fracture systems. And the prospects, these copper-gold prospects in black, tend to occur along these and particularly at the intersections. We've done this through mapping and aerial photograph mapping as well. But mapping the streams at a scale of 1 to 500. We also use geophysics, airborne magnetics, ground-bore magnetics, IP, resistivity, deep-seeing EM. And we've seen there is locally a relationship to the magnetics, to the ore body, which we can see here in purple, right there, is in a zone that's not magnetic at surface, but becomes magnetic at depth. So it's not just drilling any mag high, but by interpreting the pattern and integrating the geophysics with the geology, we have a good idea of where to put our early holes. Once we find a prospect, we do oriented core, we're on with the geometry, we then use the drilling results to guide subsequent drilling. Geochemical results have been very useful. This is the 50 square kilometer project area showing you soil. On the left diagram, we see that most of the copper gold targets in black are depleted with manganese, enriched in molybdenum, and have a high copper over zinc ratio. We have some very good drill intercepts. Some of them would rank with the best announced of all time, which we've compiled on this table along with consultants' help. The best hole to date is about 1.6 kilometers long, near vertical, at 0.59 copper and 0.54 gold. And this puts it right up there with some of the giants in terms of intervals that have been announced from Los Zapatos, Wafi, Golpu, Grasberg, Oyotogoy, and others. There was a mineral resource statement put out early this year, and that's put here. And that was done, and that was 12 million ounces of gold and 5.2 million tons of copper. However, that was only from 53,000 meters of drilling. We have since added 100,000 more meters, and that's really expanded the zone and added a lot of high grade that wasn't accounted for previously. So stay tuned for December because we're going to be putting out a second mineral resource estimate. So Apollo does continue to grow with almost every drill hole. Just to show you a spatial image of that, in black is a 1.15% copper equivalent cutoff using $3 copper per pound and $1,300 gold as a conversion factor. The absolute value is not so important. This is just a conversion of gold to copper, which is 0.63. The important thing is look at the size in gray. That's what's been announced. And look where we're going in red. That's at low grade. Now let's zoom in to the high-grade core, which is all important because this deposit is well and truly underground and will likely be exploited by some sort of cave operation. So we need some high grades to start off. Now in black is what was announced at 1.5% cutoff. That means that black zone is going to average about 2.3 to 2.5% copper equivalent at a 1.5% copper cutoff. Look how big it's getting. This is all drill proven in red. Let's make a cross section through there to further illustrate the growth. In black is what was announced. In red is what's coming. And you can see some of these intercepts with these more holes completed after the initial resource estimate announcement in January, 57, 41, D1, D2, and 41, D1. Some of these zones are very rich, 300 meters at 2.5% copper equivalent. This is where the mining operation should start. And notice that the really high grade is about 700 meters below surface. The deposit does outcrop, as I said, and makes a finger. And there is grade up at surface. But the real high grade is my hand. So how do we get my hand out quickly and early to get payback when we're considering a cave operation? Yes, the core is pretty. It has a lot of chalcopyrite, which has a lot of gold in it. And we've seen this with backscattered imagery and electron microprobe work. We can actually see the grain size of the gold in the chalcopyrite. So it will report nicely to a copper concentrate. We have some bornite. We have pyrite and a lot of quartz gangue. Now, in terms of if you were to compile on the Y diagram in situ metal value using $3 copper, 1,300 gold, if you don't like those numbers, drop it down a little bit. And on the x-axis, the resource tonnage, and this is compiled from SNL 2017, you can see some of the values of well-known past producers producing and projects that are block caves in the world. Now, that's what's been announced early this year. You can see where Alpala plots near Capiche and San Manuel for sort of bulk resource, or near Carapatina for high grade. Here's where we're going. So up to like $90 per ton rock at more than 450 million tons at a 0.7 cutoff. 3.2 billion tons at, say, at $30 per ton if you have really essentially no cutoff or just 0.15%. So this is starting to get interesting. In terms of contained metal value, this is comparing with some awfully good deposits. And here's a conceptual design showing you what it might look like, going in with a decline and a series of lifts to take out the high-grade ore. And now, just to quickly go on, since I'm running out of time, Cascabel is just up in the very far north of the country. SolGold has 72 tenements in the country. We have 10 of these prospects are very good. Most of them are porphyries or some are epithermals. 42 geologists operating, doing standard exploration methods, and finding some very interesting targets, several of which will become drill ready. And I just wanted to end with two pictures. Well, penultimate slide is two pictures of some of the high-grade prospects we're discovering, such as the Salito vein, which has over 500 grams per ton gold and 300 grams per ton silver. Mind you, this is just a selective grab sample. And finally, they don't let me go. Well, you've seen everything, and they've cut me short to the last slide, but I've said everything I needed to say. Thank you for your patience today.